Hello there, Joe the CRM chap here with a new video in my series on Microsoft exam MB-400. This is the developer's exam for those who are wanting to build solutions or extend Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform. So this is part two of a two-parter looking specifically at PCF, Power Apps Component Framework controls. In the previous video, which I'll link to in the description, we basically went through all the steps that you need to follow to get your environment set up and ready to start developing the tools. So we downloaded everything, made sure we had everything set up, and then created our project for the first time. What we're going to do in this video is that we're going to take that forward, we're going to develop our control, test it locally, make sure it all runs okay, get it deployed out into our environment, and then add it onto the form and just confirm that it all works, tickety-boo. So what we're going to do is we're going to rely on an existing sample that Microsoft have created. It's a very simple increment component control that you can just add on to a field in the application. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our project, which is basically from the previous video, is all set up and ready to go, and we're just going to go through the steps to get everything set up initially in the project, and then from there we can build and test that locally. So the first thing we need to do, a slight mistake I made in the last video, don't fall foul of it yourself. You need to make sure that you have a separate name for your project that doesn't match your top level solution. So what I need to do is just basically I want to just rename this folder on here to PCF MB-400 as sample instead. I just need to check to make sure there's nothing in here which references that. No, I think that's good. So yeah, we can just close that for now. So I've renamed that folder in there. Next thing we need to do is that we need to start grabbing the various code bits from the sample itself. So the first thing we want to grab is our manifest XML definition. So what is the manifest? The manifest basically is just the top level properties for your particular PCF control. Just expand the screen on here. It basically just defines settings such as the name of it, its current version. It also allows you to set up things, okay, like so your input properties, your input parameters or properties. So what controls and what information does the control need to be fed in order for it to work correctly? What additional resources does it rely on? So is there a CSS or an image file that you need to pull in as part of that in order for the component to run successfully? And then finally, what additional features do you want to enable for your component as well? So do you want to be able to use things such as the web API to perform create, update, read requests, etc.? All of this is controlled by the manifest. So typically you'll need to go in here and spend some time just to basically populate all of the various bits that you need in order for your component to work successfully. So what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of this sample, this starter manifest on here, and we're just going to copy in the one that we've got from the sample. The only slight change we're going to make to this is just to change this namespace to JJG. That's the only change we're going to make to that, but other than that, that is good and ready to go. Next, we need to jump into our index.ts. This is our TypeScripts. This is the sort of the nuts and bolts. This is what's doing all of the heavy lifting within our PCF control, everything that's defined within this TypeScript file on here. Now, TypeScript is quite similar to JavaScript, but it has got some additional nicer options to help you along. So all the code for this is on the website over here. So again, we're just going to cheat. We're just going to grab all that, copy and paste that into there. We are going to get a few errors that are generated. There's also one specific area of the code that we need to fix because what's on the docs website is slightly out of date. All we need to do is just add a exclamation mark to the end of this. Then when we build this for the first time, everything should work as expected. So we'll save this at this particular point. Close this down. Next, we need to create a folder within our PCF MB-400 sample folder. So we're just going to call that folder CSS. We need to create a new file in there because, as you can see, we've got two resources that the control relies on highlighted down here. So I'm just going to grab the name of the file that we need to add on, and we're going to create that within Visual Studio Code as a new file. Then once again, we're going to cheat. We're going to go onto here and we're just going to grab the CSS code. So this is a cascade style sheet. Basically just controls the rendering and how the control looks on the page. So using CSS, you can basically get your components styled in any way, shape or form that you want, really. It's quite a powerful tool to have. Next, we need to create another new folder. We're going to call this folder strings. and then again we need to add a brand new file into there. I did that a little bit too early. I need to get it on the clipboard first. That's not gone on the clipboard. How strange. So copy specifically. Third time's a charm. Lovely. So we'll grab that on there, and then again we're just going to disregard that. The nice thing about Visual Studio Code is that it does automatically detect when you're working with new file types and things like that, and then prompts you to install the appropriate add-ins to make development for that a bit easier, but we're not going to worry about that too much today. All we're going to do, we're going to grab the definition here. So the resx files are used when you're doing anything to do with localization within the application, so working with multiple languages and other things like that. What the nice thing about PCF controls is that you can factor that in and make sure, for example, that you've got your controls appropriately translated and labelled for a multi-language deployment, which is really great. Okay, so we've got everything ready in our control at the moment. Just going to open this TypeScript file again, and we should get the errors on there. Open it up so we can just verify that when I run a specific command, so I've started a new terminal, new PowerShell window down here. I'm just going to run npm run build at this stage. Running this command, we should be able to see the error messages in our file basically vanish because it goes off, it builds out and adds on the things that the PCF control needs in order for things to work correctly. And we can see there that that's basically just done that. All the errors have gone, which is great. Okay, next we built out our PCF control for the first time. We want to test it. We want to make sure that it's working before we even let it touch our CDS or Dynamics 365 environment. So what we want to do is we want to basically run another command on here, npm start. A quick note on this command is that it does implicitly run the previous npm run build command when you trigger it. So a bit of a shortcut way of doing it, and potentially a far easier way of doing it. And then at this point, we're going to be a new browser window is going to be open. I'm just going to click allow access on that for the firewall prompt. And what this loads up is our test environment, the Power Apps Component Framework test environment. And this just gives us a nice little sandbox container where we can test and make sure our component is doing what we think or hope we want it to do when we get it out into the application itself. So I can test it now just by clicking the increment button on here. I can see, yep, the control is working. Every time the button's pressed, the number in the field goes up by 1 each time, which is really nice. So that's all working, which is great. We've got some additional options on the right hand side here to help us with developing stuff. So for example, we can change the form factor for the control at any particular point. So if I wanted to test it on, let's say, a very specific tablet size, so maybe I know that people are using this on an Android or something like that, or an iPad, again I can just update that on there. The control renders accordingly. In this situation we can see the button goes down below the field itself, and again it's still working just fine. So it could be that maybe I don't want it like that, maybe I want a bit more spacing here. I could maybe tailor it and tinker about it a bit further just to get it working. Additionally, what we can see down here is our data input values. So those are the ones that have been defined in the manifest. We can just freely mess around with these values, so I can change these back down to 10 for example. It updates, just make sure things still work. I can also change this underlying data type as well. I have the list of options on here. And then finally we can see the output, which in this case is just the newly incremented value each time. So this is a really nice experience. If we were having problems with the control, what we could do is potentially go out into developer tools down here and potentially breakpoint that further, and figure out exactly, okay, what's going wrong with this particular control. And a thing to note at the time of recording this video, if your control is doing anything involving the web API, you're not going to be able to debug and test this within this environment on here. You would have to deploy your control out and test it in a dev or sandbox environment just to confirm that things are working. Just keep that in mind, that that's the limitation that you've got with that at the moment. Okay, so I'm happy this is all working. So now we need to start looking at getting this deployed out into our environment. And there's a few different steps that we need to do as part of this. It's not, thankfully, most of these are just one-time setup steps, but we do need to work through them nonetheless. So I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to do Control C. That's basically just going to stop npm at this particular point. And the first thing we want to do is we want to set up the authentication profile. So we've got two ways in which we can deploy our control out into Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform. We can either just bundle it up as a solution file locally and then import that into the environment, or perhaps even maybe chuck it into our Git repository or do something else fancy with it if we were so minded. Alternatively, we can actually deploy it out directly from Visual Studio Code, and it basically deploys out into a new solution, into our environment, and then from there we can then add it on or do what we want in there. So we're going to go for the latter option today, but in order to do that first we need to run a couple of commands just to basically get our connection into our environment all set up. So the first command is a very simple one. We just want to create a new authentication profile, auth profile. We're going to call it MB-400, and then this is the URL that we're using for the targeted environment. If I hit return at this point, it's going to open the modern authentication prompt for Office 365. I'm already logged in via Windows, so that should just connect up without prompting for any additional details, which is great. If I wanted to specifically, so let's say I'm working with multiple authentication profiles, maybe my dev, test, production, etc. You can run this command here just to basically specifically confirm, no, this is the environment that I want to target all of my commands moving forward to. So we're just going to explicitly set that just in case it's not already set at the moment. And then finally, just to make doubly sure, because we're super paranoid, we run a final command here, pack org who, and what this does is just basically just returns details about the current environment that we're connected to, so we can review that and make sure that we are in the correct environment. So this is all looking good for me. This is the environment we just set up, so I've got no concerns from there. We can sort of go forward from there, which is great. Okay, next what we need to do is we need to do some setup, and we need to actually run another build using MSBuild tools from within our project folder as well, but there's a few things that we need to do first of all. First of all, we need to set up a new folder in our PCF MB-400 sample folder. We're going to call that Solutions. Next, we're going to do a change directory into that PCF folder, and I've just mistyped that command there. So PCF MB-400 sample. Let's change that into there. Then we're going to run two commands to basically get a solution set up, a solution that MSBuild can then run to basically prepare our CRM solution file for import. So first of all, we need to initiate the details of our publisher. So those working with solutions, if you're familiar with that, we always need to make sure a solution has got a publisher, a name for a publisher, and its prefix as well. So all we're doing here is just specifying that locally so that that gets deployed out correctly. So that's created all fine now on there. Next, we need to basically reference the newly created publisher or add a reference to our solution in this folder on here so that MSBuild can basically run successfully. We're going to hit return on that, and we can see that that's been built out successfully. Next, we need to actually run our MSBuild commands, but we need to issue potentially with this is that if you've been watching the first video, we've actually missed something that we needed to have installed, which wasn't included as part of the packages that we actually installed in order to basically ensure that our MSBuild commands run correctly. So what we need to do in our Windows machine, we need to go down to Visual Studio Installer, which is in our, oh no, that's the wrong application completely. So if I just scroll down onto here, so Visual Studio Installer down here. It's going to want elevated permissions in order to do that. Let's give that a second to load. Okay, and then it's going to load up all of our active installations of Visual Studio. In this case, all we've installed are our build tools, which we want to sort of modify. So we click the button on there. We go to individual components over here, and then under code tools, we want to make sure that we've selected NuGet, Target, and Build tasks. If we don't select this, then we try and run any of the commands that follow, we just get some very nasty error messages and we can't build the project. And because we can't build the project, we can't then deploy it out into the application, which is a real shame. So that shouldn't take too long to install after downloading. Yep, so that's all good to go. We don't need to restart anything either, which is really great. So now what we want to do is there are two MSBuild commands that we want to run. The first is just basically just an MSBuild restore command. It's very simple. Next, we just want to run MSBuild without any parameters defined. Yeah, so just going off to NuGet now and getting all that. So we just run it again without that switch specified, we should be able to confirm that everything gets built out a-okay. Runs the npm build as well, just to make sure we've got the latest everything, the latest stuff from the package manager. Okay, that's all looking good. So finally, we just, well, not finally, but next we change directory back into our MB-400 sample folder, and now we can run the command to get things deployed out into the into our CDS environment. It's a very simple command: pack PCF push, and then we just specify what our publisher prefix is, so it's the one that we specified earlier. Let's hit return on this here. And it's going to go through now. It's going to basically deploy out our solution to our environment. So I'll probably just pause the video on here. We'll come back. It can take about 5-10 minutes to deploy this out. So we'll come back shortly and we'll see what's been deployed out. Okay, so we're back now and we can see everything's been deployed out, imported successfully. So a thing to note, because of how we've defined the MSBuild settings earlier, it's been deployed out as an unmanaged solution into our environment, which is fine because it's dev. But it might be that you need to tweak that depending on what environment you ultimately deploy into. But if we were to go now into our into the PowerApps portal, we're in our MB-400 environment. I click on Solutions down here. I can see I've got a brand new solution, and in there is our custom control that has been deployed out, ready to go. So now what we want to do is we want to actually get this added onto a field into the application, and so we can just confirm, yep, it's all working, ready to go. So I'm going to go back out now into my MB-400 solution. First things first, we're going to want to add the component into the solution because it's something that we now want to rely on. We want to make sure it gets bundled up and included as part of any releases that we do in the future. So just add that into the solution. Next, we're going to go onto our account form. Now, as with many other code-related things when it comes to Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform, this is something that at the moment we have to do via the Classic interface. So if we do switch to Classic at the top up here, we can see that the Classic form editor will open. And because our control needs to be bound to a specific type of field, in this case a number field, we need to make sure we've got a valid number field added onto the form. So a good one for us to do for the account entity will be number of employees. So first things first, we'll just add that down to there, just underneath there. We double click on the field itself once it's been added, go to controls, click on add control, and if we scroll down to the bottom we can see we've got our newly deployed out custom control, which is there and can be selected. So we click add on there, we can see that it's tied to the number of employees field already automatically, which is good, and we just want to tick and make sure this has been enabled for all of our regardless of where the user's accessing the application forms, whether that's web, phone or tablet. So we click OK at this point, click Save and Publish. So with that published, then we can go into our model-driven app that's already been built out for this solution. So whereabouts is it? It is here. Click on the play button. So we'll just go and create a brand new account record over here. Okay, so the formatting is a little bit off because of how the form has been sort of structured, but we can see the control has basically replaced our number of employees field, and when we click on it like so, we can actually just click up to when it's sort of the value on there. So potentially this has some business use, so maybe if you want to provide users with the ability to quickly say how many employees an account record has got, you can maybe adjust the increment, so maybe it's doing it in counts of 100 or 1,000 or something like that instead. The user can also override it as well, which is good. So if I was to add in 6,809, for example, it will just increment it from there. But effectively, the control is working, it's been deployed out, and we can now use it across, regardless of where this field is or this app is being consumed from as well, which is even better. So that pretty much rounds it up for this video now. So hopefully by watching both of these videos, you can see what the entire end-to-end process is for working with PCF controls. It is a huge area in of itself, and certainly one, if you're a traditional Dynamics CRM developer coming into the Power Platform and the new way of doing things. It does take your head, some time just to get your head around with it, working with these new technologies and things as well. So I hope this video has helped you in sort of getting over that learning curve, so you can actually start coding and building out these solutions. Because I think potentially when used appropriately and correctly, PCF controls do have a lot of legs as a concept and as a thing for you to do. Okay, so that wraps it up there, I think, for today. So stay tuned. There's going to be more videos in this series. There's already been a load of other videos as well. We've covered quite a lot of topics so far, both functional and techie in nature. So feel free to check that out. I hope your preparation for the exam goes well, if this is why you're watching. Leave a comment below if you've got a question, like, subscribe, and I'll be back soon with a new video. Take care.